I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:35. Welcome everyone who's joining us here in person as well as virtually. As always, we'll start with a roll call. Ms. Flathers?
Here.
Ms. Brunel?
Here.
Mr. Brand?
Present.
Ms. Collins?
Here.
Ms. McDonough? And I'm here. And now I'd like to ask everyone to stand for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We take that moment of silence to honor the memory of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Now we're going to go into our agenda and start, as always, with public speak. Public speak is scheduled for a period of 15 minutes. Each speaker will be permitted a maximum of 3 minutes, during which time they can speak about topics within the scope of responsibility of the school committee. All remarks will be addressed through the school committee chair. Public speak is not a time for debate or response to comments by the school committee. I also want to clarify that public speak is only for people who would wish to speak on topics that are not on the agenda. For those of you who are here to speak to items on the agenda, we'll recognize you when we get there. I did get 2 requests for public speak, and I'm just going to call on people as in the order they asked. I got their requests, starting with Ms. Claudia Trevor-Wright.
Withdrawn.
Oh, withdrawn. Okay, no worries. And the second person was Karen Sutter, and I don't know if she's here or online. I don't see her online. Is Karen here? Ms. Sutter? Ms. Sutter, are you online? I don't see her, so we're going to move on the agenda. So it is my pleasure to begin the meeting by introducing and recognizing our interim superintendent for the 2023-2024 school year. Ms. Bella Wong is joining us here tonight. Her official start date is July 1st, but she's here to allow us to introduce her so that the community can be familiar with her. I'll just say it's an honor to have Ms. Wong joining us in the interim superintendent role. She brings a couple of decades of experience as a superintendent in a couple of different settings, both in Wellesley and Lincoln-Sudbury. And also, what I thought was impressive was even when she had to take a break from being a superintendent, she couldn't get away from school, so she served as a school committee member in our community. So she sat on this side of the table as well, knows our role as well. And we're excited to have her join our wonderful team here in central office with our other great educational leaders to take us through this year as we, as a committee and as a community, search for the permanent superintendent. So welcome to you, Ms. Wong.
Yes, thank you. I also want to extend my appreciation to the members of the school committee for selecting me to come in as the interim superintendent for the Natick Public Schools. I am really excited to be here. I've heard really great things about Natick, and also I've been able to come to some of the administrative meetings already, and I appreciate the support of Assistant Superintendent Tim Love, who's been orienting me, and I look forward to being fully on board shortly. Today was the last day with my staff, the official day for teachers at Lincoln-Sudbury. So there's emotions from the beginning of the day to now. And then, but you know what, it's come full circle as I have a former student in the room. And so that's a sign. I think that's a positive sign. And I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to everything about Natick Public Schools. Thank you.
Great, thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight. So I'm going to go to the teacher representative and student representative first, and then we'll go into this, the rest of the agenda. So I don't see, do we have a teacher representative online? Probably not in the room. And we don't have the student representative either. I don't see. Okay. So we'll skip those. I'm going to actually go to the, I'm going to jump on the agenda to the, where is it? The subcommittee updates, the policy subcommittee updates, and begin with a proclamation that we have, simply because I know a lot of people are here for that, so we can have that conversation and then let you all go home, unless you want to stay here for the rest of the agenda, which you are more than welcome to do so. Here's how I would like the format I'm proposing to the committee and to the public. I will ask first Mr. Brand, who's the chair of the policy subcommittee, to provide the context of the proclamation, the work that the subcommittee did, as well as Ms. Collins, Mr. Love, who were part of the process. Ms. Brunel, I know you were part earlier. If you want to also provide context, just so that we all know what the process was that got us here. I would then encourage the committee members to ask questions first, so we can get all the factual information we need out before we begin deliberation. We will then hear from the committee any thoughts, statements, opinions, and then we'll go to the public. When we get to the public, both in person and virtual, I'm going to ask a couple of things. First of all, we're going to limit comments to 3 minutes per person. My goal is to have everyone who wants to speak. I don't want to cut anyone off. But to do that, I'm hoping we can move through the conversation by having everyone speak for only 3 minutes. And also, when you come to speak, if someone has made an argument that you'd like to make before you don't have to make it again. You can just reference, say, hey, I agree with the previous speaker, and that way the conversation will go quicker, and get all the information and all the opinions we need to hear before we make a vote. Once that is over, the committee will then vote on the proclamation. Sound good? So I'll start with Mr. Brand.
Thank you. So I will be brief on this part and then defer to the people who have been part of this particular conversation as members of the school committee or administration longer than I have. So on June 8th, we had a policy subcommittee meeting where this was a topic of discussion. And at that point, and I know the conversation has gone on quite a bit longer than that, and that's for what I will defer to Ms. Brunel and Ms. Collins and Mr. Luff, people who have been part of it, on what the process was prior to June 8th. At that point, based on feedback that we had gotten from lawyers and from our own discussions, we decided that it would be more appropriate to discuss this issue in the form of a proclamation, that's what we're doing here tonight, as opposed to as a policy. It felt more appropriate to do that. I think we're going to all talk about that now. And so our recommendation from the policy subcommittee was to not take this as a policy, but as the proclamation that you may have seen on Novus and the thing that we're going to discuss tonight. So with that, I hate to put people on the spot, but if Mr. Luff or Ms. Collins or Ms. Brunel, anybody wants to sort of go back further than June 8th.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to give a backdrop.
Sure.
So the policy subcommittee met back at the beginning of this year in response to the Shurtleff case, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, came out of the city of Boston, where the city of Boston allowed multiple different members of the community to fly certain flags on their flagpole. Then they ended up restricting a group who wanted to fly a Christian flag. That case ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, that by allowing other members of the community to come in and fly flags, essentially they had a First Amendment right, or they created what we call a limited public forum, the ability to have other folks practice their free speech. So we actually brought a conversation about a flag policy to the committee for that reason, really with the idea of, do we restrict flags in the schools? Do we have policies that address what kind of flags we have, what flags we don't have, the processes we would use, because obviously there are multiple members of the community that want to speak on behalf of their beliefs through the flying of flags. Ultimately, given the fact that schools are limited public forums in the evening when other folks come into schools, we decided against that. However, the conversation then came about regarding the actual flying of the pride flag on our school flagpoles, and if we had the ability to do that. We got advice from our attorney, and our attorney essentially said, as long as we are not allowing other community members to fly the flag, taking requests and then flying certain flags, then it would be a form of government speech that would be allowed under, and not protected by the First Amendment necessarily, and that the school committee as a whole, if they decided, would be able to practice that speech and fly the pride flag. And so here we are today now with, I think, a delicate discussion of the balancing of inclusivity and the ability to promote something that the school committee believes in.
Anyone else want to provide context?
Catherine? You don't have to.
You don't-
I
yeah,
didn't
no
mean
one-
to put you on the spot.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking, so the first notes that I have that we took this up was in earnest was in December. And at that point, we had a member of the community present to us a very detailed memo. And we had that memo, go through legal and got a couple different opinions, I think. The piece that I would just like to clarify again, Tim, is that the thought right now is that what I heard you just say today is that the classroom space, we are changing, like the ability to fly a flag in the classroom or the stickers. Is that?
If I may, very clearly that is not the case. We decided not to address that issue at all
Okay.
because of the variables that go along with that. So instead, we are just addressing the school committee's ability to practice government speech on the flag poles at school-owned schools.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good context.
Okay.
We did, and then I would say we dropped it though in January. There wasn't much that was done until maybe the last policy subcommittee meeting.
Any other? Yeah, that's that good. Any questions from the committee before we deliberate? Yeah, Ms. Leathers.
Procedurally, how, ignorance, I will assert it, new to the committee, what governs the process for a proclamation? Like, how is authorship, do they typically come out of subcommittee meetings? Are they governed by the same two reads rules that we've established? And what is the plan for today, subsequent to debate? Are we planning to vote on it today?
So even though this came out of the policy subcommittee, it wasn't a recommendation for a policy that would normally go through a two-read process. So typically with proclamations, the school committee can make them and vote on them if they choose at the same meeting. It wouldn't follow that same.
And procedurally, if a motion is made, we can vote on it tonight. Any other questions?
Why, and why did we say it's a proclamation and not a policy?
I can take a stab at it. And please correct me if I get any of this wrong. A policy would be a procedure that we are asking the district to enact, rules that we are asking the district to enact. The proclamation is essentially a potential value that the school committee is stating on our own, within our purview, to say, we believe in this, and this is what we want to do.
But then we're asking the administration to act on something that has logistic challenges, cost, et cetera, which feels, correct me if I'm wrong. And I really do not like the idea, and we can wait till motions of, and this is a deliberate, maybe I can hold this, of not doing two reads on this. I think this came out of left field. A lot of really, really invested people here who I know are, have really strong opinions. And I want to make sure that as a committee, we're doing our due diligence and making sure that we're listening very intently and having opportunities to have follow-up conversations so that we can, avoid any kind of, well, we're not going to avoid polarization, but that we can provide as much forum as possible. So there's concern coming in that this is moving through listening, distilling, and then vote is anxiety producing. To be honest with everyone.
Ms. McDonough?
So I had a follow-up question on and it's very hard to take minutes at the same time engaging in this really important conversation. But so the schools are limited public forums in the evening, so you decided not to address it at all. So what does that mean? Because you started at the beginning of with the information we had about the case, the Shurtleff case in Boston. So
We had some serious questions about if we're allowing certain flags or stickers or something to be flown or used in schools,
Yeah.
if we would have to allow all flag stickers to be flown at schools.
yeah.
And obviously, we have teachers and students who have thoughts of great importance of how they want to express themselves.
Yeah.
Ultimately, during the school day, when schools are closed down, they're not a limited public forum, right? So there really is no control from the outside on that. But because we open our doors in the afternoon to different groups, they do become a limited public forum, and different things can be flown that way. So it's not black and white, I guess, but it just, that became our reasoning for not proceeding with a policy on it.
Okay, that's, okay.
I have a question too, again, related to the difference in proclamation and policy. Does the weight of the statement, whether it's proclamation or policy, change? In other words, policies are requirements, right? If we pass a policy that everyone should wear white, everyone has to wear white because that's the policy. With a proclamation, if we were to say everyone needs to wear a white shirt, is that different, or is that still required, just the way a policy is required? I don't know if anyone has an answer to that question.
Again, I don't think it's that black and white, to be honest with you. I think this is just, the proclamation is a proclamation of speech, so I think that's the reason we went this pathway.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Flathers.
Do you have examples of other proclamations? I mean, because I've generally always just seen them as statements of values, not as an invitation to act. So I just didn't know if we've done other ones.
We've done multiple resolutions. Some have been called proclamations, some have been called resolutions, but yeah, we've done multiple ones in the past.
Do you have an example, just for reference? So I can put apples to apples.
Not offhand.
Thank you, just curious.
I'm sure I could find one.
Yeah, Ms. Brunel?
So I don't want to stop me if I'm going into the weeds, because I know I frequently do, and I don't want to take too much space in. But our rental policy, KF, written in that policy says the school committee retains the right to deny the use of school facilities to any group if it deems the use is detrimental to the interest of the community, which is why I always felt, when I was on the policy subcommittee, that there was going to be no need to take down the peace flags in our classrooms or the stickers, because that, based on the safe space DESE regulations and just based on our Natick profile of a graduate, we are communicating to our students every day that this is a safe space. I am interested that this policy, that we're saying that we potentially can't have it in the school building where the students are most often and where but we can have it outside. So that, like, I am most interested in the students' experience and what the students need. And I'm not interested in getting into a political, fight within our town. So I am disappointed in the way that this is going, because it feels like we're kicking up a storm and potentially forgetting like what the students are already used to, what they see. And I really appreciate the proclamation. But at some point, the proclamation I think it becomes a procedure. And so often we are so careful in the school committee not to overstep our purview. It's not to say I wouldn't eventually support it, or, but I think it's really important that we follow the process.
Yeah, Mr. Brandt?
Just as I'm currently looking for, Framingham 2 years ago, this Framingham School Committee had a proclamation for exactly this, and I just haven't been able to find it yet, but that's what I'm looking for. So there is a proclamation from Framingham on this topic, so I'm going to try to find it.
It was actually just last. I don't think it was.
Last year.
There was one last year.
I thought it was just recent. I thought it was
There was one in 2021, but they may have done it again.
Ms. Collins?
And not bringing forth a policy at this point doesn't mean we won't get there at some point. It's just that we had twisted ourselves up in knots over the wording, and that was just going to serve to delay anything we could do. whereas this part was much cleaner than the inside of the schools piece. Because you're right, Ms. Brunel, we can deny it if it's antithetical, to our purpose, but it was going to delay what I view as important things. It's not to say we won't continue to work on it, because I agree. I think the inside of the classroom is really, really important.
Just a point of clarification, are we saying we can't put anything in the classroom, or we're just not?
We're not putting a policy that limits
Okay.
what can be in the
So we're not
classroom.
taking out what's in the classroom?
Correct.
Okay.
But keeping in mind, to Ms. Brunel's point, that we do have policies around anti-discrimination and hate speech and those kind of things that we can address, right, if those things come up. A policy of allowing multiple flags or stickers, or those kind of things, could put the administration they would have to figure out how to do that, right? Which one is hate speech, which one isn't, which one is okay, which one is a political movement, which one's not, and it would take a lot of time to figure that out, I think.
Thank you. You see your hand up? Yeah, Ms. Brunel?
Yeah, so in the evaluation process this year, we were given a slide, the Ad Council retreat. We weren't at that Ad Council retreat this year, but there was a slide in which it talked about, it talks about we care about critical thinking, belonging, and connectedness, and really encourages our staff to think about how to have difficult conversations about race, immigration, disability, gender identity, and more. And in that, I think that because of what you said, Tim, like that first ruling, there's a directive that says classroom decorations may not include partisan influencing material, especially flags, mass or U.S. international country flags only. So at the beginning of this school year, I think our staff was told that in the classrooms, only flags of Massachusetts and the United States could go up. Is that?
No, that was, in order to start this conversation, that was the original draft policy that we had shared and said, hey, let's have a conversation about this. That was never implemented in that way.
So even though this is at the Ad Council retreat,
These were conversations that we were having about what we may or may not have to do.
Okay. But I get, because that's my concern, is that by doing this, this non-public forum piece, we are like getting in our own way, and we're creating a problem within the schools then, by distinguishing like, this is government speech, this is a public forum, this is a non-public forum. We're creating, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Anyone want to respond?
I don't
Yeah,
see it, but go ahead.
let's put down.
I was wondering if there was any conversation in the course of the subcommittee about the impact of supporting students and staff should the proclamation either go forward as is, it has many different pieces to it, or the impact of it not. Maybe the impact of it moving forward, since you have since you've recommended that it move forward, the impact of supporting our staff and students.
So semantically speaking, we recommended considering it here.
Okay.
Right? We didn't make a
Okay.
recommendation to support it or not.
Okay.
We made a recommendation that the most appropriate place and way to consider it was as a proclamation with the full committee.
Okay.
And so to your first question, no, we didn't have a conversation about sort of the impact of it.
Okay.
Basically, we decided this doesn't feel right as a policy, so let's just
Okay.
not, let's give it to the whole committee and have this discussion that we're having tonight.
Okay.
Can I ask the committee about potentially changing the format that I suggested? Would it be helpful for the committee to hear from the public and then have us
Sure.
Sure.
former position?
Do you want to hear the proclamation first?
Yeah, do you want to read the proclamation? Sure. Sorry.
Just up to you.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
There is one edit that I would suggest. It's down in 18, and I'll highlight it when we get there. Proclamation in support of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning LGBTQ+ students and staff. Whereas the Natick Public Schools are committed to creating an inclusive, safe, caring, and challenging learning environment viewed through an equity lens, and whereas the Natick Public Schools recognize the importance of equity and inclusion, and whereas all students deserve to feel safe and welcome in their schools, to be known by their preferred name and gender identity, as well as to see themselves represented in the curricula, and whereas everyone should be able to live without fear of prejudice, discrimination, violence, or hatred based on gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation, and that right should be acknowledged at all levels of public education. And whereas Natick Public Schools are an integral part of the Natick community, and the staff of the Natick Public Schools are valued community members, and whereas it's imperative that students and staff, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and community leaders, and whereas the school committee and staff are also committed to honoring and valuing and affirming LGBTQ+ students, staff, and families through its policies, practices, and curriculum, and whereas the Natick Public Schools and its school committee and staff stand by our LGBTQ+ students, and staff, and take seriously our responsibility to provide safe and non-discriminatory and inclusive environments for people of all orientations and identities as they reflect our diverse community. And whereas the Natick Public Schools rejects hateful language and actions based on gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. And whereas on June 15th, 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court held that discrimination based on an individual's status as gay or transgender constitutes sex discrimination within the meaning of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And whereas the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 76, Section 5 states that, quote, all public school systems shall, through their curricula, encourage respect for the human and civil rights of all individuals, regardless of race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation, unquote. And whereas in the 1993 a joint initiative between the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, and the Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQ+ Youth created the Safe Schools program in response to concerns about LGBTQ+ youth suicides and other risk factors. And whereas the 2021 Metro West Adolescent Health Survey showed that 23% of Natick Public School students in grades 6 to 12 identify as LGBTQ+, and 69% of high school students and 61% of middle school students in Natick Public Schools have experienced a decline in their mental health since the beginning of the pandemic. And whereas the National School Board Association, and SBA, believes that education is a civil right and no student should be discriminated against based on characteristics including gender and identity. And whereas the Natick Public Schools and its school committee urge our citizens and community members to value and recognize the numerous social, historical, legal, and political contributions of LGBTQ+ staff and students, and actively promote the principles of equity and liberty. Hang on. Sorry. And whereas increasing visibility and raising awareness fosters a welcoming school climate where LGBTQ+ students, families, and educators can live their authentic lives and be treated with dignity and respect. And therefore, it be it proclaimed that the Natick Public Schools urge all to respect and honor our diverse community and celebrate and build a culture of inclusivity and equality throughout the entire year. And be it further proclaimed that the Natick Public Schools will fly the Progress Pride flag. This is where my change is, parentheses, as attached, close parentheses, beneath the American flag outside of all school-owned buildings year-round, to signify that it affirms, supports, and values the gender identities and gender expressions of all students and staff, and will continue to further efforts in our schools to create a welcoming, safe, inclusive learning environment for our transgender and all our LGBTQ+ students. And the reason that I added that was so that we were all talking about the same flag.
Great, thank you. So with the permission of the committee, I'll open the floor now to the public. I'm going to go back and forth between in person and virtual. Either way, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'm going to point at you if you're here, so that way I don't have to embarrass myself with whose name I remember, whose I don't. If you are virtual, same thing, raise your electronic hand and I'll go back and forth. Again, just as a reminder, please, when I call on you, please go on the microphone, the podium, state your name and precinct, and you have 3 minutes. Mr. Brand is going to be helping me with that. He's going to raise his hand after when there's 30 seconds left, so you know that there's 30 seconds left. For those who are virtual, I'll raise my hand when I see his hand, so you can see my hand. And with that, I'll open the floor to Patty. Your name I do know.
Thank you. Patty Sierra, Precinct 7. I'd like to read a statement into the record, please. The proclamation states that Natick Public Schools are committed to creating an inclusive, safe, caring, and challenging learning environment viewed through an equity lens, and I couldn't agree more. My concern relates to your last paragraph, point 18. It says the Natick Public Schools will fly the Progress Pride flag outside all school-owned buildings year-round, et cetera, et cetera. I'm often told that words matter, and actions matter also. When I look up the definition of equity, which you say you are committed to providing, I find the following definitions. From Oxford Languages, equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. From the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, equity is justice according to natural law or right, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. Notice that both definitions reference being unbiased and impartial. So tell me, how does a decision to fly a flag that represents one group of students meet the definition of equity? When you choose to favor one group over another by the action of flying a flag that represents an exclusive group, you are in essence telling others that they are not as important. Is that being impartial and unbiased? It sounds like favoritism to me. By flying the Progress Pride flag, you are choosing not to fly the Black Lives Matter flag, the Christian flag, or flags that represent other religions or ideologies. You are overtly favoring one group over another. You are elected to represent all students, all parents, all residents, and all taxpayers, and your decisions and policies should reflect that mandate. Point 18 of your proclamation does not reflect unbiased equal representation. It favors one group over another, and that is not equitable. My other concern is about inclusion, another stated goal of the Natick Public School System. Oxford Languages defines inclusion as the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources. Is a resource a flagpole and an opportunity the ability to fly a flag? When another group wants to fly its flag on school flagpoles, will you be able to discriminate and say no? What if Black Lives Matter wants to fly a flag? Will you allow that? Or flags that denounce Asian hate, anti-Semitism, or Islamophobia? Students from these groups deserve to feel safe and welcome also. Assuming flying the Process Pride flag falls under protected government speech, what will that change if flags are swapped out to represent different marginalized groups? Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court voted unanimously in support of the free speech rights of a conservative activist within the city of Boston when the city refused to fly a Christian flag on its flagpole. Well, although this situation is different, are we setting ourselves up for a legal challenge? Will there come a time when our flagpole activity becomes subject to a free speech challenge? Do we have an opinion from legal counsel on these possibilities? The American flag represents all groups of people who are fortunate to live and work. There is no need to fly another flag. Students should be taught to respect each other's unique characteristics and differences and to value the tenets of equity and inclusion. The words and actions of adults who teach and set school policy are an important part of that learning process. A school committee which shows favor to one group over another by its words and actions teaches neither equity nor inclusion. It demonstrates favoritism and is divisive and exclusionary. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go now online to, oh, sorry.
1 second. Could you send me that statement for the minutes, please? Or just email it?
Yeah.
We do have a legal opinion that I think we should just reinforce, that if the school committee were to decide to move forward with this type of action, that it's considered government speech, and government bodies can have government speech. And that was I don't know if the memo is linked in the agenda, but that was brought to us, I have to say, by a constituent. And so that's why we would not find ourselves in the same situation as the Boston City Hall, because you, as a governing body, you can have a government speech.
Great.
Clarification, just so long as you are not allowing other groups to fly the flag on the pole.
Yes, thank you.
My point was that I agree that right now you're calling it government speech, but if you decide later on to start swapping out flags, is there going to come a point where it changes? So I'm looking at down the road, if we start, this is a precedent, and it goes down a slippery slope, right? So if we start with this flag, and then someone else comes in, and someone else comes in, at what point do we create a legal challenge?
Yes, just so, because there's a lot of people who want to speak, I'd like to discourage kind of back and forth. And we can definitely respond when we speak.
So just a point of order, I have to step out for like 15 minutes. Can someone else take the minutes? Like, is anyone able to? I'm sorry, I just have to.
Ms. Brunel, thank you.
Okay, hold on.
Just give her 1 minute to try.
So not yet, but Miss or Mr. Well, I don't know the pronouns. Danny Witherby.
Hello.
We'll go next, but just hold 1 second. Are we ready? Okay, we're ready. 3 minutes. Thank you.
All set? Okay. Hi. My name is Danny Witherby. I live in Precinct 8. I'm a lifelong resident of Natick, Massachusetts, and I am a queer woman. It's hard to believe, but 10 years ago, I walked into the brand new Natick High School to begin my freshman year, coming this August, 10 years. I entered that daunting building, a very quiet, rather lonely, closeted teenager. The day that I left that building, years later, I walked away feeling the same. There was absolutely progress then in the way that gay people were viewed as compared to 10 years prior in the aughts and even further back into the 90s. But comparing that progress to the progress in 2013's, the difference is stark too. I didn't feel comfortable outing myself when I was a student in Natick High. The environment, while occasionally acknowledging the existence of queer students, was not the most warm and inviting. I remember the few publicly out peers of mine being mocked by other students. It was not something I wanted to share about myself, to reveal to anyone in that environment. Today, I work with Natick public school students. Year-round, I interact with students as young as kindergarten, entering middle school, entering their teenage years, and I can tell you the difference is staggering. We talk about LGBT issues nonchalantly. Students shut down bigoted comments from uneducated peers trying to be funny. The queer students are still here. They always will be, but they're louder now. They're resilient. They're visible. And this visibility and this representation is vital to their ability to grow and thrive. I believe this proclamation and the flying of the Progress Pride flag outside schools is not, in essence, favoring one group over the other, but uplifting an often demonized and dehumanized community. Flying this flag would honor and be symbolic of the fight queer students have fought to be heard, to exist visibly as themselves. I urge you to pass this tonight. We are here, we are queer, and today, especially in the face of fascist adversity across our country, it is the day to scream our support from the rooftops. Please pass this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from the public here in person? Yeah?
Hi, my name is Pam. I'm in Precinct 1. Suffering doesn't discriminate. Every group, all of which are made up of unique individuals with different demographics such as sexual orientation, race, gender, and religion, experience struggle, trauma, and suicide. Most importantly, all suffering and suicide is equally painful and tragic. No one groups or individuals is paramount. Suffering and suicide impact both the afflicted and those who love them, adults and children alike. We, many in the community who I speak for, are compassionate and concerned about all students, staffs, and family members' mental health and suicide risk. With that in mind, we'd like the Natick School Committee to pause approval of its current proclamation, which most of us were not aware of, and instead review and approve a better and inclusive proclamation in support of all at-risk students and staff. Whereas the Natick Public Schools recognize the importance of equity and inclusion, where all groups and individuals are on equal footing. And no at-risk groups or individuals are treated as second class to other at-risk groups. And whereas Natick Public Schools are an integral part of the Natick community, and the staff of Natick Public Schools are valued community members. And whereas, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men, demographics that reflect many Natick Public School staff and families. White males accounted for 69.68% of suicide deaths in 2021. Whereas, based on the most recent Youth Risk Behavior Survey from 2021, 10% of youth in grades 9 through 12 reported that they had made at least one suicide attempt in the past 12 months. Female students attempted 1.86 times as often as male students, 13% versus 7%. American Indian or Alaskan Native students reported the highest rate of attempt at 16%, with white students at 9%. Approximately 3% of all students reported making a suicide attempt that required treatment by a doctor or a nurse. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that law enforcement officers have a 54% increase in suicide risk when compared to the civilian population, which impacts our school resource officers as well as students and staff with law enforcement family members. And whereas according to the CDC, suicide, drug overdose, and alcohol-related deaths, known together as deaths of despair, are increasing across the United States. And from a public health perspective, suicides and drug overdose deaths share risk factors.
Excuse me, sorry, that's 3 minutes, so if you can wrap up.
Okay, I am wrapping up. I'm sorry. I'll be done in a minute. The crisis in Massachusetts affects people from all backgrounds, ages, and ethnicities. In 2021, 7 deaths in Natick were classified as opioid-related. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the Natick Public Schools will fly the Suicide and Prevention Awareness Flag, which is right here, beneath the American flag outside of all school-owned buildings year-round to signify that it affirms, supports, and values all at-risk students and staff, and to signify that Natick Public Schools does not treat one group's suicide risk, mental health, or suffering as more important than other groups or individuals' risk, mental health, or suffering. This proclamation and approach is meaningful to all Natick Public Schools staff, students, and families, upholds the district's equity and inclusion goals, and offers equally symbolic support and allyship for all at-risk groups and individuals in our school and in our community.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the online. Cody Jacobs, 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Cody Jacobs. I'm in Precinct 2. First of all, I want to thank the subcommittee, both past and present, for their great work on this, for their hard work on this. I know it's something that's been thought out over a long period of time, and I appreciate all the effort that's gone into it. I think this is great. I think it's a very good proclamation. I think it's well thought out. I think that it's been vetted by legal counsel to ensure that it doesn't open us up to unnecessary liability or anything like that. But I do want to point out that I do agree with what a member of the committee stated earlier, which is that I think this is just a first step. I think that what goes on in the classroom is certainly a lot more important than what's flying outside of the school building, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. I've been concerned before. I've one younger child in the school system now, and one that's about to be entering kindergarten. And I've been concerned there's, compared to other holidays, there's not as much about pride in the school curriculum. And when we see, constantly they're reading books and stuff like that involve cis and hetero characters, and it's just normal reading or whatever. But, when you talk about someone who's queer, then all of a sudden it's a political book or something like that. And I think that's a problem. And I think we need to make it more normalized and more of a part of the curriculum, even in the younger grade areas, for it to be inclusive. So I do think this is just a first step. However, I don't want to minimize its importance, because I think it's really critical that we adopt this, that we fly the flag as other communities have done, including Framingham. And I, like I said, I really appreciate the subcommittee's work in coming up with this. Because right now this is a divisive time, as another member referenced earlier. There's no other way to say it. LGBT people Q people are under attack across the country. And there is a divide, and we have to decide where we stand as a community in a time like this, and whether we will protect our people and our values. And I hope that we'll take a step in that direction by voting to approve this proclamation tonight. So I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the room? Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Tracy Sokolowski. I just want to first, in response to a previous speaker, of course I'm concerned about suicide. I don't think that there's an educator in the world that's not, but 9% of white males does not equate to the 45% of students who identified as LGBTQ who considered suicide last year. So I think that's an important statistic to bring up. I also want to say that I'm concerned about the statement that would be made if the school committee doesn't support this. You send a loud statement to any student or family member or teacher or educator in this community if you don't fly this flag after this proclamation. I'm sure there's 1,000 reasons why people could come up with why other flags would be important, and I'm not here to say that they aren't. But I have a former student who just spoke very eloquently online, who I didn't even know was LGBTQ when I had that student. And I know my kids really well. So what does that say, that I had a student who wasn't comfortable enough to share that they identified differently than maybe other people suspected? So we need to be a more welcoming community, and we need to fly that on our flag outside so people walking in know that they're welcomed. Teachers coming to the school to potentially interview know that they're welcomed, that adults who are haters know that their hate isn't welcomed. And this isn't about equity for all and comparatively. Equity is not a pie. By flying a flag for one group, we are not saying we don't welcome others, nor are we equating our flying a flag of one group being more important to others. It's a statement that at this point in our country, in our society, in our community, we have a group of people who need our support more than others right now. And that's the statement that the school committee should make. So I appreciate you thinking about that.
Thank you. I'll go back online. El Martinez.
All right, let me know when you're ready.
Oh, you're ready. Yeah,
right.
We're ready.
Hi, my name is El Martinez. I use they, them pronouns. My family home is located in Natick in Precinct 8, and I attended Natick Public Schools for my K-12 education as an LGBTQ+ student. I am now an incoming senior at Clark University, a graduate of the class of 2020. I'd like to start my testimony by providing some context about my relationship to LGBTQ+ communities in Natick and in NPS. In my time at Natick High School, I served as president of the Gender and Sexuality Alliance for 3 years. I facilitated annual trainings for all incoming Natick Public Schools faculty about LGBTQ+ inclusivity. I amended the health education curriculum of Natick High to be more inclusive. I consulted on several gender identity policies for former Superintendent Dr. Nolan, and I participated in countless events, dialogues, and initiatives related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the NPS system. I've put hundreds of hours of work, hundreds of hours of my childhood into ensuring that LGBTQ+ students, families, and staff are safe in Natick Public Schools. And there is still a lot of work to be done. LGBTQ+ youth, especially transgender youth, are under attack in this country and around the world. And I urge you as people in positions of power to protect us. I'm here in anticipation of opposition to this proclamation by anti-LGBTQ+ people seeking to impose their views on the public school system. Many of the talking points used by those who oppose the display of flags in schools cite concern over the well-being of children or claim that flags are equivalent to indoctrination or unfairness. The reality is that these opponents don't want us to exist. They do not recognize that LGBTQ plus adults were once LGBTQ plus children, and they believe that by erasing our history and our symbols, they can get rid of us. Instead of recognizing and demonstrating support for a well-documented, disproportionately vulnerable population of youth, they are trying to build an education system that does not acknowledge or include us. We cannot minimize the meaning of pride flags, especially for young people. At 15 years old, after being interviewed for a New York Times article about my lobbying efforts in the Massachusetts legislature, my family home in Natick was defaced. Someone came up onto our porch and slashed the pride flag we had hanging while I was home alone. And this incident has permanently impacted my ability to feel safe in Natick and in school at the time to this day. Like any other kids, LGBTQ plus youth are deserving of representation, safety, support, respect, and justice. I urge you to favorably pass this proclamation and also recognize that the issues faced by LGBTQ plus youth are worthy of comprehensive policy. Our community expects actions to follow words. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the room? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Jerry Pierce, Precinct 10. I'm here tonight because I applaud the proclamation, and what a very opportune time to have the proclamation, because Natick just hired a equity and inclusion director. So it's a very opportune time to introduce this to the school system. When I heard that Framingham already had this there, I said, my God, this is only the second time in 55 years of being a resident of Natick that I thought Framingham did something better or more important than Natick, except the ball games, of course. It's just, I would hope that we're going to be with the times, not behind the times. I work very closely with a lot of seniors down at the center, and even the COA has a mission statement that includes all of this, and they publish it every month in their newsletter, and they even had a multi-day seminar for the public to go over all of this. So if seniors can do it, our kids can do it. Gosh. I belong to Pilgrim Church down in Sherburne, and just recently they became open and affirming church, and they even outside they have a great big tree. I don't know if it's maple or oak, but they have the pride colors wrapped around the tree, 6 feet high. And if Sherburne can do it, Natick can do it. Also, yesterday I spent the most of the day in downtown going to the public events at the library, on the Common, and then the movie at night at the Spiritual Center. And that was all about inclusion and being repressed and trying to overcome all of that. And I said, what a opportune time again to bring this to the public. And our kids, are already exposed to this. Don't be fooled if you think they aren't. TV, the media, and conversations with other kids, they know all about this. Don't think they don't. And I know this because my partner and I, my partner of 58 years last week, 58 years, we raised 2 sons. And 15 years ago, there were students in the Natick school system, and they would come home and tell us, they would educate us about this kind of stuff. So I know it goes on, so don't be an ostrich, please. Just, do this. Okay, I guess that's about it. Just remember that the kids are more in tune with things than you may think they are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go online to Lisa Huerta-Bengen.
First, I just want to apologize. My camera is not working. But what I want to say is I think it's very dangerous when we start talking about statistics without understanding what the statistics really mean. I am a lifelong Natick resident, a former school committee member. I am also the mother, and a very proud mother, of a trans child. A child who has suffered greatly from biased, from hate speech, from a lot of things I will not get into from his peers. And I am so proud of the Natick School Committee for writing this proclamation. But what I want to say, I am also an active volunteer with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And let's get some facts straight. And this is the true facts from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and from the Trevor Project. And I'm just sorry, wait a second, I have them right here and I just want to pull them up so I can read it correctly. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people aged 10 to 24. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning LGBTQ youth are more significantly at risk. LGBTQ youth are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. It is estimated that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide each year in the United States, and at least one attempts suicide every 45 seconds. The Trevor Project's 2022 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health found that 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. I had really no reason, I really was just going to listen, but when we start talking about suicide and we can all interpret statistics the way that we want. For many years, I sat on this board with the Metro West Health Survey, and every year that survey was done, the one thing that came back about the Natick Public Schools is that our LGBTQ youth felt afraid.
Lisa,
They
you're out of,
suffer.
it's 3
I'm
minutes.
sorry, I'm sorry. But what I want to just say is I am full support of this proclamation, and we will be doing a huge disservice to all of our students, not just our LGBTQ students, but all of our students if we do not fly this flag proudly in front of all our schools. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Anyone in the room? Going once, going twice.
Only 3 times.
3 times. You'll do it? Go. Great. Sold.
Of all people.
Frank Foss, Precinct 10 Town Moderator, speaking to you as a 40-plus year resident of this community. I sent you an email. I can't read it in 3 minutes. I think it's pretty comprehensive, and it will really give you more details and background on my thinking. But for the public's sake, I really think that unity and unification of our community, or actually of our country, is vital now. We're going into a presidential election era, and it's going to be horrendous. And we are going to be in a place that we just don't want to be in. I can feel it now. So it's probably better to be careful and cautious as to those things that you make that might divide us. So the summary of my thoughts are this. This agenda item fractures our community, creating a segment over another, thus not uniting us, but dividing us. We must recognize that our differences should not divide us, but rather bring us closer. Flying any flag not representing all of us defeats such a unification. As a community, we have the power to bring about positive change, much of what was been talked about here tonight. So let us come together, work towards creating a more united community. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands online, so I'll go back. I'll go here first because you already spoken. I'll come back to you.
My last minute back, but.
Your last minute back.
Hi, my name's Debbie, and I'm in Precinct 1, and I just listened to the discussion about how this would divide us, and I can tell you, as a parent of children that live in this community, when they see this flag flown, they see it as something that unites us, they see it as something that makes a welcoming community. They see it as friendship. My children are Black children in our community, and they would love to see the BLM flag flown everywhere, but they are not at all offended by seeing the pride flag flown, by this peace flag flown. They see it as something that unites our community, and so to hear discussions around that it's dividing, it's just not real. I mean, these kids, I have 100 kids come to my house, and the children feel safe when they see this flag flown. It's important for the children in our community. I'm not saying that there's not more that we could do, but for children in this community, this is a signal of safety. And in the schools, it feels like something that, it feels like a warm hug and makes the children feel safer. And I think that the proclamation is, it benefits our community.
Great, thank you. I think I saw another hand. Yep. Oh, there's one. Okay.
Chris Therian, Precinct 2. I think that we're missing something that probably hasn't been brought up much because we live in this very liberal town and this very liberal state, and New England's super liberal. But prior to the pandemic, lots of things have happened since then, but I was a foster parent to students, teenagers who were LGBTQ and had been put in the system because their parents didn't want them. So let that sink in. It happens here. We need this.
Thank you. I'll go online. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Doyle. I live in Precinct 5, and I just wanted to urge my support for this proclamation. I think it's really important as a teacher also in the town. I've just been witness to the last few years of just a lot of, national struggle and difficulty and aggression towards this community, LGBTQ community. And I think it's incumbent on us to firmly state our support and be explicit about our support. And I can just say from the teacher perspective that the more welcoming and open and transparent and just obvious we are, the kids feel safe, and that's what they're telling us they need, and we need to listen to them. And I just think that this proclamation is written really powerfully, and I think that as a town, we need to.
I'm gonna kill you. So there's a huge rumble, and I was like, "Mother."
Oh,
sorry about that.
Okay.
You can continue.
No, I just want to urge my support for the proclamation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else in the room besides Tracy? So I'll let Tracy go. Second. Okay, Katie, then Tracy. Just because you want it, but it's hard being a teacher, isn't it?
Katie Joyce, Precinct 5. Thank you for having this discussion tonight. I want to just say a couple things. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made before, but let's be very clear. Being gay, transgender, lesbian, anywhere on the LGBTQ spectrum is not a political act. It is also not a religious issue. There are people from every religion in this world who identify as LGBTQ. It is a part of human existence that has been throughout our history, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. LGBTQ people are our friends, they're our neighbors, they're our children, and they are petrified right now. Yes, we are in Massachusetts. Yes, it feels better than being in many other states in this country. The world for LGBTQ people is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because they look for signs of safety everywhere they go. We can't go to Florida in my family. We won't go to other states because literally my child is not safe and certainly doesn't feel safe. And I know that LGBTQ children are looking for signs of safety in a way that I am not looking for signs of safety because I don't watch the news every night and see legislation aimed at my very being. These kids see that. And when they walk somewhere and they see a flag, they take a sigh of relief and say, I am safe here, because they are not safe everywhere. And I think we as a community need to recognize we like to all be equal, but we're not. We're not treated equally. And these children need a safe space. They need to know that they're safe there. They need to know that they're supported, because when they walk out into that world, they do not know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy?
I'm back. Tracy Sokolowski, Precinct 10. I'm also, in addition to being an educator, a passionate historian. So I wanted to, precedent was discussed earlier, so I wanted to speak about precedent of unity and using unity as a reason not to proceed on matters like this. Right before the Civil War, there were many people who believed that we shouldn't do anything to harm the flag, to harm the country. We needed to unite. We needed to stay together. We had to fight. We had to unite in a different way. History has taught us that. During Little Rock in 1956 and 1957, the president of our country, Eisenhower, said, proceed with caution, right? We have to go slowly. People can't handle this. History taught him he was wrong too. We have to at times take a stand, and if you need precedent, you need only to look at history to know that there are times in our history that different groups need protection in different ways that other groups do. And you've heard it, there's emotional, there's societal, there's all kinds of reasons. But if you want precedent, all you need to do is look at the history books and to know that this is something that we can take a stand on and we can make a statement. And I just don't understand what we would do differently, and how detrimental it would be to anyone who identifies, or anyone who cares about anyone who identifies, anyone LGBTQ, for someone to say no to this proclamation. I need everyone on the school committee to understand the statement you are making if you vote this proclamation down. You are saying you do not support LGBTQ students. That is 100% what you were saying.
That's right. Thank you. I'll go online. Grant family.
Sorry, I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I just wanted to, I don't want to take up more time, but I just wanted to echo what a lot of the speakers before me had said. It's no secret I've been critical of the school committee in the past couple of years, but you guys have got it right on this one. I appreciate that this is at the point where it is, and I really appreciate a positive vote on this one. As a teacher, I know just so many examples, but this year just putting one of those little Progress Pride flags on my water bottle led to a huge reaction from students, huge positive reaction. Our students in Natick feeling included in their school and feeling safe and feeling welcome in their school leads to better everythings. And as a teacher, the statistics on mental health and suicide for LGBTQ students is terrifying. So anything that we can do as a community to help that, I think we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Claudia.
Good evening, Claudia Trevor Wright. I am in Precinct 6, parent of 2 kids in Natick schools. Did not plan to speak tonight, but I'm deeply appreciative of the fact that the concerns about anti-Semitism were raised, because as a Jewish person, I know that anti-Semitism is deeply on the rise, and surprisingly, Massachusetts has seen some of the most steep increases in anti-Semitism. And I would just like to say that I feel comforted by seeing the pride flag. My kids feel comforted by seeing the pride flag. We don't see it as taking away from our safety, because we know that marginalized communities protect marginalized communities, and that our liberation is tied to everyone's liberation. And so I don't see it as a threat or a favoritism issue. And in fact, I'm deeply appreciative of the fact that when we drive around Natick, I see so many rainbow peace flags everywhere. I have also seen swastikas in this community recently, multiple times. And that makes me feel deeply uneasy. But I see more peace flags, rainbow pride flags. I see those, and that is what keeps us here, and that is what makes my children feel safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Just one second. Anyone else in person? Okay, Patty, you can go again. Sure.
I just want to say thank you for having this conversation. And I just want to point out one thing. I listened to everybody, and I agree with their concerns. And there are people who spoke and said they don't see this as divisive. We're a divided society. We're a divided town. And the people who look at this issue and many issues live in a very liberal town. I live in the other side of that town, basically. But I move into this side because I agree with a lot of these issues, and I see division. So I don't think we should kind of not think about that. I mean, all you have to do is look in Burlington. Every kid does not feel safe in schools. Every kid does not want certain ideologies taught, let's say. So there's division, and we need to talk about it. And I don't think we can sweep it under the carpet. And I think we need to have honest conversations, because all of us come from a different culture, a different viewpoint, and we need to live together. So I don't, what you do is up to you, and I'm supportive of whatever you do. But I want to have more conversations like this, because I think it's really important if we're going to learn to live together. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else before we move on to the committee? I don't see anyone online. I don't see anyone in person. I would like to move to beyond this topic. I want us to end this conversation soon, so I would encourage us to go once around with our statements or comments, how we plan to vote. Actually, there hasn't been a motion, so there is no vote yet.
Would you like a motion?
If you'd like to make one.
I move that the school committee vote positive action on the proclamation as amended.
Second.
Now that there's a motion to vote, I'd like to ask the committee to share any statements, thoughts you have. Obviously, if you want to, you don't have to, so that we can move to a vote on this motion and then move on to the rest of the agenda. We're making our poor not even yet interim superintendent stay here with us, waiting for the retreat. Just kidding. Any order, whoever, you can raise your hand.
I want to thank everyone who spoke. As a parent, as a citizen, it's hard to imagine voting any other way but yes. And it is absolutely, I think, critically important, personally being affected by the mental health of students, that we make this happen. But I'm also a very practical person, and I do want to make sure that we do it in the right way. What has stuck out to me a little bit is, this is a community in crisis, and we need to address that. We need to make sure kids feel safe. So I would like to understand a little bit better for, in terms of the government, in terms of government speech, and this proclamation is in place. I didn't see it time limited at all. If we have another community in crisis a year from now and want to raise a different flag for that same purpose, are there any implications in how that goes down? And I want to point out, from my perspective, I do see this, while this is a symbol of pride, I do think it is one of the most inclusive symbols that we have, and I think is viewed broadly that way. I think many have said that, and I know others don't necessarily agree, and I really appreciate and have had long conversations, but I always have to put, in this case and in this role, putting student safety first, and I think the safety of our students makes us critically important. But I would be open to a motion to postpone vote on it if we have any concerns that this puts us in a position where we can't show support in other ways or opens up. And that's just an area where it's all very recent information into me, and so I'm trying to make sure that practical hat of knowing we don't end up in a situation where we're fighting other symbols that we don't want to fight, and that we just do it the right way.
Great, thank you.
Is that a question? Like, can someone answer that?
Can you restate the question?
Well, my question is, this was a lot of information legally that came at us very quickly, and this is why I think generally we have kind of the two-read process, where we read it publicly, we have public debate, we're able to go offline, then come back and vote. And so I just want to know that we have the kind of coverage of that we put this flag in place, and what if next year we want to put another flag in place, and what is that tipping point between government speech? I mean, can we vote to put 15 flags in place and still be that it's not limited? Like, these are some gray areas that feel.
So it's a legal question about where does this put us, right? Just to clarify. Okay.
So the best way I can answer this is how Attorney Waugh answered us now, which is if you decide to do this, it would be government protected speech, the way you're doing it now. I wouldn't be able to answer if you wanted to take, if you open up a process where people can come in and ask you things and ask you to fly flags, then you're in slippery slope, right? But if it's your speech and you're having these conversations, you're protected as you are now. But I wouldn't be able to. I think that's something we'd have to come to in a year if if multiple groups come forward and they say, hey, we want this, and then you say, well, that's our speech, But that's a question that would have to be answered later that I can't answer now. Just here and now I can answer with the attorney.
Does that answer the question? Kinda.
I mean, it's yes, in as well as legal answers get answered in very gray and nebulous ways. It's difficult, it's challenging. I just, and I don't think should deter us from doing what's right, for kids right now, and for what I truly believe is, a community that's been in crisis, and but to other points is not the only community. And I do think that this is an inclusive symbol for in general. But I mean, I would get behind a motion to continue and move forward with this, but I do in general think we are doing ourselves a disservice as a school committee when we bypass the idea of having multiple reads. Like that's a policy we've said we really want to get behind in our conversations recently, and I think in absence of a real emergency, I think it's just good practice and allows everyone to do their due diligence.
Thanks. Anyone else? Mr. Brandt?
I am happy to go next. So this is my 4th year sitting on this committee, and I find that I'm a software engineer professionally. I find that I don't get very emotional about a lot of things, but this particular topic is sort of hitting me in a different way. So before I get to I'm going to vote to support the motion. And I really appreciate everybody who's here and online and everybody who spoke, even the people who I don't agree with. I particularly appreciate their willingness to come forth and and say what they feel. And I took notes on all of that, and I really appreciate all of it. For starters, I just want to sort of read, for those who don't know, what the colors on the Progress Pride flag represent, because I think it's important. And ironically, I am color deficient, and so I don't actually know which colors are which. The red stands for life, the orange for healing, the yellow for new ideas, the green for prosperity, the blue is for serenity, and violet is for spirit, and then there are chevrons which point to the right, which have a meaning of their own. The chevrons pointing to the right are symbolizing, as I understand it, progress that's already been made and the progress that we have to continue to make. And the colors of the chevrons, black and brown, are for people of color, and there are white, blue, and pink lines for the trans community. So I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, and shortly before I came, I was speaking with my 15-year-old daughter, and she gave me permission to share our conversation, everything about it. And I asked over and over again, is it okay for me to share what we talked about? And I said, and what I said to her was, so I said, I am a cisgendered white male who has lived a charmed and privileged existence. She is a cisgendered, heterosexual, female teenage girl. I said, how would you feel about this flag being outside your school. She said, I think it would be wonderful. And I said, but why? And she said, well, we have a lot of students in our school who are part of that community who don't feel safe. They don't feel welcome. I said, but do you feel that you're not included in it? Do you feel left out of not being on that flag? There's not a color for you there. She said, no, not at all. This is a 15-year-old. She said, when everybody in my school feels like they belong, it makes me feel like I belong. I feel better when everybody around me feels better. So my friends and I, and I'm paraphrasing because she probably would have said my friends and me. My friends and I always have to throw one little joke in. But she said, my friends and I would love this. And then she told me a story, and I'm not going to do it all now. She told me a story about a student in school who she doesn't know but sees in the halls. And she said this student walks around with so much confidence, is so proud of who she is so happy to be who she is, and she wishes that everybody felt that way. This is like I said, a cisgendered, heterosexual white girl who is also pretty lucky and doesn't have a lot of the sort of mountains to climb to feel like herself. She just feels like she wants everybody around her to feel like she feels. And now I understand that she's one data point and she is my daughter and might have a similar sentimentality to me, and it's one person. But after we had this conversation, that's when I said, like, are you all right with me sharing all of this? And she'd be happy to. So I think there's never a great time, I should say, never an easy time to make tough decisions. I understand that this can be polarizing. I understand that there are people who don't agree. I hear you all. I understand, and I appreciate all of that. But if we don't make tough decisions sometimes, we will never, if we just put them off, we will never make tough decisions. So for me, I'm voting yes tonight. I hope the rest of the committee does as well. And this is the first of many steps. Actually, Patty, who I don't see anymore, maybe she's outside, said something that I thought was really, really important. And it was that there are more conversations to be had, and I agree. I think there are a lot more conversations to be had. This is, like those chevrons say, this is, we can be heading in the right direction and not get there yet. We have to keep working. And I look forward to more community engagement. I hope you all come to all the meetings and engage like this, because I think it's really productive, even if we don't agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wants to go next?
Okay.
Ms. Collins?
So I'm struck by a couple of things that have been said tonight. One is the idea that, well, doesn't this mean that if we're showing a preference for the LGBTQ population? I don't see it that way. I see it as a recognition and a public reminder that we have staff and students in our community that continue to be marginalized, and they're an important part of our community and deserve to be treated equally. But a review of the most recent Metro West Adolescent Health Survey says it's not happening. We heard tonight about some suicide statistics, but one of the ones that stuck out to me most in this was 25.5% of LGBT high school students reported that they've been bullied on school grounds in the last 12 months, as compared to 13.5% who didn't identify as LGBT. So almost twice as many. And in the middle school, the numbers were more frightening. 42.6% of LGBT students said they had been bullied on school grounds in the last 12 months, as compared to 20.5%. So more than twice. I recognize that putting up a flag doesn't solve all that, but it certainly begins to have the conversations and says to those kids, our kids, that this is safe, you are wanted here. To the question of, well, won't we have to fly everybody's flag? No, the city of Boston got in trouble in the shirtlift, thank you. I think it was shirt loss, and I knew that wasn't right, case, because they were taking applications to fly a flag. That isn't the case here. We're deciding as a committee what flags or flag to fly. And the question was asked by someone earlier tonight, or the statement was made that flying a flag that does not represent all of us does us a disservice. In an ideal world, I would agree. And I'm probably going to take flack for this, but so be it. The same American flag that flies outside of this building flies in Florida, flies in Texas, places that are going out of their way to just destroy human beings, figuratively and literally. This is not elevating one group above the other. To me, that's like saying, well, person A drives a mud-covered race car, kind of looks bad. We gave person B a shiny new Chevy. Now they're equal. Or the Chevy guy is elevated. I don't see it that way. The race car's still going to win all the races. And as a cisgendered woman, I don't have all the advantages that my colleague has as being a man, but I know I've had privilege simply because I can walk into the room and I'm not black and I'm not brown. Simply because when I'm in a relationship, I'm in the right kind of relationship. There is no right kind. But some people view it that way. To me, if you find love, take it wherever you can find it. I think we need to do this, and we need to do this now. And the reason that policy has two reads is because it's affecting, in most cases, it's affecting the public. And the first time they may see it or hear it is at our first read. And it gives them time to weigh in. This affects the public, possibly, I don't know, but this is our decision and our decision alone. So I hope you will join me in saying yes to this.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I don't think the first read is only for the public. I think that the ability to have, discussion and discourse and then be able to take time away from this forum before voting is a really healthy and valuable process to follow in general.
Thank you. I am hesitating a little bit. Ms. Gorseth, who is the vice chair, is on vacation. She sent me a statement for this conversation, which I'd like to read. I do want to just state, obviously, she didn't have the privilege of being here to hear the conversation. So I just want to put that context, but this is the statement that she came up with coming into the conversation. Again, this is on behalf of Ms. Gorseth. We're going into a year of uncertainty as we work to attract our next permanent superintendent. Hiring a permanent superintendent has to be our #1 priority. Should we decide to make big changes during the next year, we must first ensure that they're going to benefit students in the long term. We also need to know how prepared the district is to implement change, be prepared to educate the community about the need for change, and to ensure administrators and staff have the resources and support they need. With this in mind, I feel that we must first check with our interim superintendent and central office staff to see what they need to support principals to see what they need to support principals and teachers as our community adjusts to a change like this. This may or may not require delaying the vote while work with them. While I fully support the concept of flying the Progress Pride flag, we need to ensure that we have support for our staff as they deal with the inevitable questions, concerns, and fears that will come from our community. And above all else, we need to ensure that the decision we make is the right for the students. So that was her statement. Obviously, she's not here to vote, but just to add it to the conversation. I'm happy to go next in terms of my own statement as a fellow committee member. I'll just start by saying I prepared a bunch of notes, and I'll try to go through them quickly. But this is a hard decision. This is a difficult decision, and I would consider this a bold decision. But this is why they pay us the big bucks, right, to make these difficult decisions. And I did struggle, both in hearing the conversation tonight, but also through the emails, the various emails that community members have sent us, the various conversations that led to this, to decide what is the right thing in the right time. Well, ultimately, what I decided to focus on is data that from the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey. I won't go through. I feel like the Metro West Adolescent Survey has been cited, so to follow my own norm of not repeating what other people have already said. It is staggering to see the difference in depressive symptoms, in attempted suicide consideration, so whether or not you considered attempting suicide in the past year, and having a suicide plan by both sexual orientation status and gender identity status, especially by gender identity status. There are some differences as big as 30 percent points. I'll just cite one. 59% of students in the Metro, the whole region, not just Natick, but the whole Metro West region, 59% of transgender and gender questioning students reported depressive symptoms. 45% said they considered attempting suicide. 35% said they had a suicide plan. This is a staggering difference, and it's scary. And this data is a call for help. When I provide this data, I always make sure to say LGBTQ students are not at high risk for mental health or suicide issues because they're LGBTQ. They are higher risk for mental health and suicide challenges because they're LGBTQ in an environment that discriminates against them, that isolates them, and where they don't feel safe. And that's where we come in. This is not an LGBTQ issue. This is a school climate issue. This is a district-wide issue. We have the responsibility to make sure all of our students are safe. We need to make sure that we move forward ideas, policies, vision, goals, proclamations that keep our students safe. And I think this is it. This is a moment in which we can do something. And as someone else said, I am under no illusion that passing this proclamation will end racism and discrimination, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. But if we can move the needle even just one bit, and I think we can with this proclamation, we would have done our job. I heard a pastor yesterday speak at the Juneteenth event in the Natick Commons, and he talked about the importance for courageous decision-making. And though I do not consider myself a courageous person at all, I think that this is the moment where I have the opportunity as an elected official to make a courageous and bold decision, and that decision is to support this proclamation. I do think I feel comfortable with the legal background that our district attorneys have provided us. I've read it carefully. I feel strongly that we are legally in the right situation. I know that sometimes there's questions about process, and I do apologize as a chair if I could have done better. And I say that just not to throw under the bus my colleagues from the subcommittee, but I do think this is the right decision, and this is at the right time. I also I want to acknowledge that I've heard all voices, and I've considered and digested all voices, and I keep wondering, is this really going to divide us? And what I keep coming to is that no, this is not a divisive symbol. This is a symbol of inclusion. If you look at the meaning of the flag, it really is about recognizing everyone. And when we say everyone, truly everyone, including those who feel invisible in our schools. This is what it's about. And for that reason, I'm going to support this proclamation. Ms. Brunel.
Thank you. Well, one thing I will say, because this came at us fast, it gave us a true opportunity to debate in real time and think on our feet. So this feels like an authentic moment of deliberation and conversation with the community. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming and for giving their opinion and their perspective. A couple things that struck me, a speaker tonight said that this is being gay or lesbian and LGBTQ plus community is not a political act. And I agree with that statement entirely, and I want every person in our community to be fully who they are, and anything we can do in that to allow them to be themselves, I think is essential. So I wonder how we can affirm this, how we can do this in a way that is not a political act either, because that's my fear, that we are kicking stuff up for students in a way that might bring other repercussions that they didn't actually invite. And I'm struck tonight that we heard from one teacher in the district and a couple from outside the district, but we haven't heard from our EAN reps and we haven't heard from our student reps. So it's just always important to me that we have, as a committee, we have those voices. So I'm going to support this proclamation tonight, but I want to continue to bring that up because I think that we are, I don't think that this was the right process, although I think it's the right choice for students who need it. So I will be frustrated about the process tonight, but I will feel, I would like to offer what I hope might be a friendly amendment, maybe a second motion. But to Elise's point, Ms. Gorse's point, I think that we do need to look to our administrators about how things like this happen. And I am curious if we could, in the proclamation, give each school level and each school the ability to decide the how of the flag being flown. I'm just thinking out loud here. At the elementary school, you have flag bearers that go out every morning and put up the American flag. So are we creating, is that a difficult thing for them to have to put up two flags? Is there a different place where at an elementary school you could easily put up the flag? Is it more powerful that when the students are in middle school and high school that they're putting up the flag and, I don't know who puts up the flag at the high school, to be honest. I'm just thinking logistically here, and I am uncomfortable with the fact that this came to us in December and it was just felt like it just got buried. And then we weren't even supposed to have this meeting tonight, and it's the #1 item on the agenda. Do you know, that's where I'm frustrated with this process, and I want to ensure that we have thought through this in how we are going to make this happen. So back to last thing I'm going to say is back to that, because it's not a political act, I would like to make sure that this is a community act in how we pursue putting up these flags.
Thank you.
So I wasn't going to say too much tonight, so I won't do that. My feeling on this is if it makes students feel safer, then we should do it. My frustration is with the process, and perhaps this is something we talk about in our retreat with Bella in the next hour that we have, because I feel like this has come up in 3 different times this year where either something has come from the policy subcommittee as a discussion item, or for example, the calendar, we ended up forming a working group to try to figure out, because we hadn't talked to a lot of students and staff and the impact on them. So we've got that. We had the situation in the last meeting with the METCO and approving the funding, and it was absolutely the right thing to do, but my frustration with that was the process and the funding, and was it secure, and we're approving, $271,000 in June, and so then this, and I haven't actually had a chance to talk to a lot of people. I haven't had a chance to read all the emails, and so it's the right thing to do, and it's very compelling to hear from people today and talking about the safety of students, and that is the most important thing, so we should do this. But it was compelling when Mr. Brand said that the policy subcommittee was not recommending the proclamation. They were saying that the policy was not appropriate, but a proclamation was. And so then this was our time to talk about it. And I just don't, I didn't feel like we had time to really do this. It's the right thing to do. I think we would have come to the same outcome. I'm sure that we would have. I think we've got to be clear on what our process is, so that the whole community has time to weigh in on these things that do matter, and that they will see. So I'm going to support it. It's the right thing to do for students, so that they feel safer. But I would like that on the agenda for process.
So duly noted for our retreat hour.
In case we forget the retreat hour that started.
I'll just say I'm doing my best here, but I know, but we can do better, and we will do better with everyone's input. Ms. Wong, you'd like to add your comments?
Yes, thank you. Shai had said that he only texted me this afternoon that it was on the agenda item, and the agenda for tonight was different than what it has become, but it seems it's really too big a question to not weigh in. I think about 9 years ago, so as a member of the MASS, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, we're asked to volunteer for different committees from time to time, and they wanted a representative for track at the MIAA. So I called the executive director. I said, hey, Tom, I would like to do that track one. He goes, you know what, that got filled already. Would you like to be one of the representatives on the Mass Commission, LGBTQ plus Youth Commission? We have 3 superintendents that serve on that, and we have a vacancy. Would you like to do that? I called for track, and he asked me to do that, and I said, okay. So I served on that commission for 6 years, and I learned a lot. And there was so much shared tonight that was very thoughtful. I am so impressed by the respectful discourse from different points of view. But there's some other things I learned that might also be helpful to you. The issue of intersectionality. So we're not talking about students who are just one thing or the other. But LGBTQ plus identifying as that, along with other factors, socioeconomic status or race or ethnicity, is the intersectionality that makes it that much harder for students that identify. And so when you look at those statistics, how can it be? Is because students aren't just one thing, there are many things. The other thing I learned about is that the highest factor for homelessness is being identified as LGBTQ+, and family rejection is a heartbreaking reality that happens. So we're talking about a population that just is high risk. And I really appreciate the thoughtful comments that were made, but it isn't always the fairest thing to treat everyone the same. And then we often recognize that people have different risk factors, and we treat them differently. We make accommodations. I think everyone accepts on IEPs, we make accommodations. So sometimes it's more fair to make accommodations to assure a more even playing field. So, and I'm wary as a newcomer to be speaking, but it's just to share what I learned by being on the commission.
Thank you. Before we take a vote, I just want, because I know people run around as we do that, I just want to appreciate everyone who came online and in person, everyone who wrote and sent us their feedback. As a member of the community said, this is an ongoing conversation, and we should continue to have it. If there's ideas for how to do that, please let me know. With that, can we go to a vote? And you want to speak before the vote? Okay, briefly for 3 minutes or less.
Shai, as she goes to the podium, just really quick, I'm just curious about like the logistics of this and what much they've been vetted. Matt, you shared with me that the cost of this is not a significant cost because we already have the flagpoles. But should this go, like, before we make a very prescriptive proclamation that says exactly where this piece will go, should we turn to our administrators and say, what would be helpful to you, or is it more helpful for us to make a decision?
So let's hold the question because she's on the podium, and then we'll go back to the question. Yeah.
I'm Donna McKenzie, and I was kind of the silent voice in the room because I chaired the policy subcommittee when this issue first came out. And I want to point out that it was brought up by parents. It was parents of struggling with anguishing situations with their children for whom flying this flag would mean a lot. And it may seem like the issue disappeared in December, but it was a very gray, complex issue, and it was being sorted out legally to do this through amending policy and becoming up by a new policy. I was just as surprised as others on this committee that the process that was suggested was to do it via proclamation, because that was not the case when I was on the committee. And when I was on the committee, I also asked about Black Lives Matter and was told, well, that's a political group, unlike the LGBTQ. I respectfully disagree with that assessment. As a feminist, I do believe the personal is political, and that there is a sense in which everything is political. And I don't like groups pitted against each other. But I do support this, and I do regret that on my watch, we were not able to do this. I'm not sure I would have agreed to fly it all year, but I understand that. I think making kids feel safe is the most important factor. I might have agreed to fly it in June or in October, and then to fly a Black Lives Matter flag on another month, or suicide prevention, because all of those feelings also, all of those sentiments, all of those values are allied with the vision of the school system. So, but I listened to Brenner Greer yesterday, African-American professor at Wellesley College. And at the end of what she was saying, she said she hated Black Lives Matter signs. She had one on her lawn, but she hated it. She hated it because it was horrible that it was necessary. And this is a Black woman saying this, right? So I dream of a day when these flags aren't necessary, when there is more true unity, when there is more respect. I know there is not. We have a really serious problem for bullying, so I support your motion.
Thank you. Going back to Ms. Brunel's question about the logistics, does anyone want to respond to that?
I can share my understanding. Although, Mr. Luff, you can correct me with the costs because I don't have it in front of me. I believe the total cost, if we would be around $4,200 all in. That would be inclusive of the flags and the work required to modify the flag poles to support a second flag. And we could theoretically have the flags flying in the month of June if, procurement happens fast enough. Is that accurate?
That is correct. The retrofit of the flagpoles is around $750. It's adding clips, and to some of the flagpoles, adding new kind of roping systems in there. I did a pre-investigation of the costs, just in anticipation of the vote. The flag company can come out next week and complete that retrofit, and the flags could be in hand by then too, to fly them by the end of June, if you like. And in terms of the other question, in terms of, how we're going to move forward, how we're going to fly the flag, who's going to do that, I would actually seek the advice of our principals and maybe our student groups to help us decide that.
I like that idea because that might actually create more conversation around this, right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't just be a flag that just surprised people, but it would involve the groups of people we haven't heard from tonight.
Yeah. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion? Anyone against? Any abstentions? The motion passes. And now we'll move on to the next items on our agenda. And again, people are welcome to stay or,
This is a great one.
yeah.
Let's keep this.
Should we move on to this security policy? Do people need a break or
Want to give 1 minute?
5 minute
so that we
recess?
can-
5 minute recess. Resume our meeting after a brief recess. I'm hoping we can go through the rest of the items on the agenda quickly. Obviously, take your time, but if as much as we can, so we can go into our retreat. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Motion by Mr. Brand.
Don't have a good way of doing this.
Rose definitely left, right? Just kidding.
Did I put the nameplates out?
Oh, good.
You all set?
Yeah.
And second by
Great job.
by Ms. Collins. It's all good. We have to learn to live in the era post Rose. Can I? not you, but
No, not era.
all of us.
Era.
Can we?
I wasn't in a bunch of those meetings. I was in a couple. I'm fine with abstaining if I don't have any concerns.
Do you? Well,
Unless we
so
wanna
the other
separate
option is
it
to.
out, but
Yeah.
I can just abstain. I don't have any concerns with them.
Okay. So all those in favor? All those against? And abstentions? 2 abstentions? Okay, so we have 4 in favor and 2 abstentions. I keep looking to my right as if I'm telling Rose. Miss her already.
You're doing great, Julie.
Yeah, you're doing great. The review and approve policy GBEEA. And again, I'll turn things to the subcommittee or
Do you want to go
Deputy
first?
Superintendent.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Policy GBEEA, which is our written information security policy, based on a cybersecurity incident that we had back in the, I think in the winter of this year. Our Director of Technology, Mr. Dennis Roach, requested that we ask staff to utilize multi-factor authentication for their devices. So that's for their Gmail system. So it's an enhanced security process that we use to ensure that all of our information that we are relaying on our email systems are secure. Many companies use this and is a best practice in the field. So he has asked that we move this forward quicker than we normally do. And so I am asking the committee tonight to bypass the normal process for policy readings, which I am really hesitant to do right now since the last conversation happened, because Mr. Roach wants to make sure that he can initiate this for all the new staff coming on board now, because he will initiate it from his end. And it essentially adds 2 sentences to the policy that's currently enacted. It says all employees are required to enable multi-factor authentication. And employees may use a cell phone to do this or request a security key, which is a little key like this if they don't want to use their personal cell phone. And that there'll be authentication protocols in place that enable and maintain multi-factor authentication to ensure secure access to school accounts and resources. So simple changes, but just really securing our systems in a way that Mr. Roach can implement immediately as new staff come on board.
Mr. Brand?
So if I could just add to that, first I want to just make clear that we did cover other policies in that policy subcommittee meeting that we are not bringing up tonight that will go through sort of the traditional process. But after hearing Mr. Roach speak about this one, it felt like it rose to the level of being more urgent, more time sensitive, and that combined with and that's all we need to sort of bypass that typical process. That combined with the relative small change and the very, very limited scope as to who this affects made it clear to me, and I won't speak for Ms. Collins, but the policy subcommittee voted our recommendation to support this policy change in this manner so that Dennis could make this, while he is recommending this already to staff, this makes it so that he can make the change now before any new staff start, and it makes it much easier, given our summer schedule, to implement that change now and just be ready for any new staff who join NPS during the summer. So that's that.
Ms. Flathers?
I really don't want to be petty or pedantic about this, but I really struggle with we keep doing this, that we're bypassing the process of the second read. This happened in the winter. It was so urgent. I don't know why this isn't always coming forward already. It was discussed in subcommittee meeting on the 8th and was alluded to in the public meeting on the 12th, when just as easily as this was an emergency bypass to vote today could have been hey, we really have to add an agenda item on the 12th so that the public could have actually really known that this change is being made. Like, other choices could have been made to not, make this again a fire drill. I also feel like, I assume what is the lack of compliance? I imagine he's already asked us to do two-factor authentication. I did it. Is there a huge amount of non-compliance if he were to ask new hires to do it before this policy is in place? I imagine most are used to it. The third concern I have is that the language isn't clear here. When this was brought up, I said, well, is there two-factor, on machines? Like, what about Novus Agenda? I use Novus Agenda. Like, I have a login there. That doesn't offer two-factor authentication. The language isn't actually specifying. It's for your Google Suite only. It just says school resources. So if there are other applications that teachers and faculty are using, they're left without real clarity about whether or not that should be used.
Any other comments before we take a motion?
Can someone answer that?
Which part?
About the multi-factor for other applications besides, should we clarify that in the language? That would not be, we have done that before. Is it just for Google, the Google Suite?
So it is for Google Suite. That's what we're referring to here. The other programs that we use may or may not have the ability to do multi-factor. The town, for example, runs Novus. I know they're having their own conversation about multi-factor authentication. So this is the Google Suite that we're referring to in relation to that.
Ms. Brunel?
I guess, but why is this an emergency? I mean, besides the obvious, like why does this have to happen now?
I would say that our technology director would say that not doing immediately would possibly cause security breaches as we move forward. And so the quicker that he can do this and require that everybody does it, which means essentially, so let's say there's, I want to say 65% of the staff right now that have done this, for example. If you enable this policy and this practice, he will be able to flip a switch essentially and require that everybody does it before they go on. And so he can initiate that for all staff rather than having them volunteer to do it. And so I'm going by his recommendation on this.
So the only way that the administration can require staff to do something is if it's a policy?
This one is a tricky one because it requires the use of either a different device or a security key if you get logged out. So he is hesitant to do this if somebody does not have access to a different way to get in if they can't authenticate themselves.
Mr. Brand?
And I guess I could just speak professionally because I work in this environment as well. I think the longer, when you know of a security risk, the longer you wait to address it, particularly if you're bringing in new people, the more it becomes a matter of responsibility or irresponsibility. You have to, if you have an opportunity to reduce your risk profile, you should do it as quickly as you can. That's particularly when you're dealing with networks and systems that house secure information. personal identifiable information, all kinds of things. We have a pretty easy opportunity now to drastically reduce our risk profile when it comes to technology, and so that's why I think the timing is now. I can't speak to, like, if the incident was, I wasn't on the committee at the time in the winter, why. All I know is that it came to the policy subcommittee on June 8th, and that meeting happened to happen, like, wrap up within like an hour or two before the agenda for the subsequent meeting was due, and it felt like that was too rushed. So this was the first time we could get it on, and because of the summer schedule, we don't have a lot of other opportunity without putting more meetings on, and this felt like a pretty easy one to discuss now.
But this was instead, it doesn't feel like it would have been too rushed to have brought on the agenda just to do a read of this is the change and notify the public that change was being made on the 12th, so that we could have voted today and at least there would have been notice. This is not a controversial item. I do think it's very important to be clearer in the language, because when you say something, enable, maintain multi-factor authentication to ensure secure access to all school accounts and resources. I mean, if we're putting a policy that they have to have, and only for certain accounts, I think that's, we need to just, I'll go forward with it, but it feels like it's something took many, many months, and then it's suddenly a fire drill emergency, and we're not following our own best practices, and I find that frustrating.
Ms. McDonough.
2 questions. Actually, a question and a motion. Question. Is there a cost to this? Because you said if they don't have a cell phone, they would be given like a key thing that some people have.
Dennis does not anticipate it be a cost.
Oh,
it's not a cost. He has keys. They have keys on site already.
Okay, great.
And very few people, of the 65% or whatever, very few of them have requested the separate, so I think he has plenty.
Okay, and now I have another question. Are there any issues with people having this be authenticated on their personal cell phone in terms of security?
It's not quite the way it works. It's like, give me an email that I can email you at just to ensure it's you. So it's not sharing information that way, so that would not be an issue.
It also doesn't, just for clarification, technology-wise, it doesn't require online access. So there's like a Google Authenticator app that you have to have on your phone that's sort of independent of any network access. So it doesn't really eat into anything on your phone.
Okay. So I would move that we amend the policy to include the Google Suite language, which I don't have the policy in front of me, but can someone find the move to?
So the line reads, all employees are required to enable multi-factor authentication, MFA, in order to be provided access to a school network account or school resources. Employees may use a cell phone to do this, or request a security key if a cell phone is not available.
I would just say multi-factor authentication, MFA for their Google account.
Through their Google Suite account is what I have here.
And then the other one the same, to access all Google based, because then there's resources that are in like Google Classroom that are all governed. Like, our students are mostly all under the Google umbrella, but I don't know that.
I would just, if it's all right with the amendment makers, which we don't have a motion, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's my motion.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
But
except that I don't have the phrase because I don't have the policy in front
I
of me.
would qualify Google with NPS Google, so it's not that we're not requiring them to have it for their personal Gmails or whatever it is.
So can I just, what would the phrase that we would add? Move to add the phrase.
Through their NPS Google Suite accounts, right after MFA.
Okay. Through their Google Suite.
NPS Google Suite.
Okay, accounts.
In both places. I would assume you mean in both places.
NPS Google Suite accounts.
Second.
Yeah, in both places.
Before we vote, I would like to make just a comment. This is kind of me speaking as a member. Just because it came up several times now about process. And I want to be respectful of everyone's feelings, but just to say personally, for me, I appreciate that we have a subcommittee that we have chosen, that we as a committee selected people to do the work and make the kind of call when they get something. Is this urgent and requires us to bring it forward to the committee, or is this something that could take the time for 2 reads? this was deemed by the subcommittee to be something that they would like to have us support in one read because of their urgency, it is at the pleasure of the committee to say, yes, this is urgent, let's approve it, or to say that we can't have it's possible to have a motion to say let's postpone it to a different meeting. That's a conversation we should have at the committee level. So instead of anyway, I just want to say I appreciate the subcommittee brought it to us with their opinion that this is urgent, and as a committee we should decide when we want to consider something urgent versus when is it not urgent. So it's really up to us as a committee as opposed to just the subcommittee.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and I am cognizant of the wishes of the committee to have 2 readings. I know there was conversations back in December. I have been trying since then to make sure there have been 2 readings, and I will continue to do that as we move forward. There will be some of these that come up, if they're emergencies and the committee so desires, but I will do whatever I can to ensure there's first and second readings of policies as we go forward. Okay.
Did you second my motion?
I did.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other comments about the motion before we vote on it? Seeing none, not from the public, as exciting as this is, I'm shocked that you're not. I'm just kidding. All those in favor? Any abstentions? Anyone against? The motion passes. Let's.
Through that curve in
Yeah,
there.
that was just for the amendment to the policy.
Oh,
We have to actually
I thought it was a
approve the
friendly
policy.
amendment.
I don't think we had a
Oh, there was-
motion to approve the policy.
Oh, okay. So
Is that the wrong order then?
Motion to approve the change to policy GBEEA with the amendment as amended.
Second.
okay, so now we have a motion to approve the amended motion, which we just amended by the vote. All those in favor? Anyone against? Any abstentions? 6-0.
Julie voted with her elbow.
I think that
Trying
counts.
to type while she's voting.
It keeps changing. Approval of special education prepayment of tuition for FY24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are requesting, as we have in the past, that the school committee approve up to $2.4 million to prepay special education tuitions out of the savings that we've incurred in fiscal year 24, for fiscal year 23 for fiscal year 24.
So moved.
So I'm just going to read that. So it says, motion to authorize the deputy superintendent to prepay up to $2.4 million in special education collaborative and out-of-district tuitions.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can you confirm this is the same amount as last year? The same cap?
Last year, we did a cap of 2.6 million, I think. We're not going to get to that point. Right now, we're looking at around 2.168350. As I talked to Dr. Ray this morning, that could be modified a bit in the next week or so, so we won't get above the 2.4.
In terms of how much savings there actually was, or in terms of?
Typically, the cap that we use is the amount of the tuitions we could pay for, which is 1 quarter of private tuitions or 1 year of collaborative tuitions. So that's where we got that 2.6 number. So we would not do more than 2.4 because Dr. Gray is relatively certain that it's going to be around 2,168,350 or so. So the cap is just there to, we won't reach that cap this year.
Ms. McDonough?
I know there was an email on this, but are we continuing to expect this sort of prepayment, or is this, again, unusual and we should not expect it next year in this sort of savings?
Somewhat unusual. The memo talked about a certain amount of ESSER money that we use for interventionists that we had funded, so that was about $600,000. A significant amount in substitute savings that we hopefully will not continue to need. And then finally, we have an incredible amount of open and unfilled positions that we had savings from this year. So as we roll out of the pandemic and get more stable, I don't anticipate that we'll continue having these types of savings. Of course, with Mr. Gillis coming on and Ms. Wong, we'll have further conversations about how we proceed.
And without the savings, it would just need to go into the budget.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions or comments about the motion? Ready to vote? All those in favor? All those against? Any abstentions? The motion passes. And then I think we're under our last motion, which is...
Sorry, can I just make a quick request that when the number is finalized, will you bring that back? Okay.
100%.
Thank you.
And the last motion is on the approval to enter into a licensing agreement with the YMCA. And do you want to provide background and context?
Sure. Pursuant to your policy KF, which is your facility use policy, there's a requirement that the school committee approves any changes to fees that we may implement under that policy. Now, right now, we have daily rates or hourly rates for different organizations. Did a lot of research with both our attorney and the procurement officer about the best way to go about the use of the Johnson facility, as we discussed at our last meeting, to provide childcare services, after-school services for not just our ASAP students that are currently enrolled at Johnson that will be there next year, the 26 of them, but possibly another few classrooms of kids through the YMCA. I won't go back into that conversation as you had the conversation last week, but what I'm asking for you today is to approve the entering of a licensing agreement, which essentially says that we will grant the YMCA a license to use those parts of our facilities for the after-school child program. I will come up with an MOU for that and work with them on what the cost and that licensing fee would be that I would bring back to you so you would know what that is to ensure that we are making sure that our costs are addressed. And then the MOU, I'm starting actually meeting with the Johnson staff tomorrow morning at 10:30 to talk to them to make sure that I have their input before I get into any more details. I will include things like security, where they can go, what they can use, all those pieces that I think will be relevant. And we do have a current licensing agreement, or the town does, I should say, with the YMCA to utilize the East School building now. So it's a very similar process that we use, or the town used, for the licensing at the East School.
Yeah, Ms. Brunel?
So I've thought a lot about this, and I'm removing myself as from being a Johnson parent and living through the last couple years of this. So I'm just looking at this from a bird's eye perspective and trying to approach this as a school committee member. And I received a lot of questions from community members about these spots, and I think that it's essential for us to consider as a committee the long-term plan of this, because if we open up after-school spots for students for 2 years and we tell them, we've already said it in the last meeting, those spots will not be open in 2 years, I think we are creating a problem for parents in 2 years. So say I'm a parent right now that is waiting for childcare and I'm on a wait list at Tobin. Maybe I can stay on a wait list at Tobin. I probably do, right? But if that's one of the questions that came to me. Like, what happens if I go out, if I leave say my kid's at Lilja and I volunteer or I opt in to have my kid go to the Johnson YMCA childcare in 2 years when that closes, can I go back to the Lilja ASAP? So that's my concern right now.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think we have to continuously look at where we have options for childcare as a community. This option is here now, right, to ensure that the kids that are in the queue that can't get childcare now can get it next year. That's the idea. This is not a one-time decision and a short, this is a short-term fix to ensure that kids have what they need, and then we have to continue to look at it as we go forward. I think that's the question: is what are we going to do for those kids next year? And then we look at the future as we go. ASAP, obviously, is still open at Lilja. It's open it would be not necessarily ASAP at Johnson, but it would be ASAP rates and financial assistance that ASAP gets for Johnson students, just so you know that would be part of the MOU. If you're now a Brown student, then you used to be a Johnson student, you can still have ASAP at Brown, right? So those things are all in play. I do agree that we have to wonder and deal with what we're going to do about childcare in 2 years post this process. It's conversations with the town, it's conversations with our constituents, our community about what other buildings we might be able to use for that. The Y may find other space too, right? So we address it as we come. This particular piece puts together a childcare opportunity for next year for our kids that need it.
A couple comments.
Sorry, Ms. Flathers, and then Ms. McDonough.
A couple comments. Yeah, I always heard kind of in a long-term dreamscape, in the years of listening, of the ideal of being able to have pre-Ks in the elementary schools where the kids will actually matriculate, and keeping kids in those schools and their school communities for their after-school care, just as an goal. How does the administration feel about in continuing to rely increasingly on an external vendor, and what does that do in terms of the time and effort and investment we're making in expanding our ASAP program? And what does that mean long-term for trying to keep these programs? Because I think we all have the goal of busing less. And I'm just imagining, I don't know if you guys know the Johnson traffic, there's a lot going on there. I'm just imagining you pull 80 kids from all 4 elementary schools, and so you have 4 buses plus Tobin arriving, just those kinds of logistics. And I do agree with the long-term plan. I'm just articulating, I don't just think about it as a long-term plan of what happens to those 80 kids, up to 80 kids 2 years from now, but how does this fit into a longer-term plan of how we evolve, the most cost-effective, least traffic, most efficient after-school programs in that pursuit of that. I just worry this is a little bit of a, hair trigger, we have an opportunity, let's slap some duct tape on it and make it happen, and it's happened so fast. And I would never want to limit giving, families that need childcare and, pulling the emergency escape hatch for those families next year, because there's been so much burden on them. But I think in terms of our retreat and planning, I think we really need to look at if this is this kind of emergency lifeboat, how are we going to make sure that that's not adrift on the ocean somewhere 2 years from now? And my other comment is just in terms of the MOU and getting feedback from Johnson staff, I really, in terms of, are they going to get phone calls, and how does this affect the principal? And poor Robin Slattery, is she going to be getting calls because they're oh wait, my kid's at Johnson for after school? Those kinds of things that won't necessarily be thought of. I mean, I can easily see Johnson parents whose kids are technically YMCA not realizing the difference between what was ASAP and what's YMCA, and that causing burden on the staff in the school. And so I assume that that's going to be really deeply considered.
And we're going to utilize, if I may, our current practice, for example, at the E-School, we have the preschool there during the day and the YMCA in the afternoon to help us with that, right? We've gone through this with them already, and we have some of the nuts and bolts already, so I'll bring those things up with the Johnson staff as well, and they get their feedback on things that I might not think about. So that'll happen tomorrow morning.
Ms. McDonough?
So 2 things. One, I thought I saw an email that said there was a possibility that this could be longer than 2 years. It just depends on what the building inspector or the town, or that in other towns they have been able to use spaces that are no longer actual schools.
Yeah, the question that still remains is whether or not it will become a change of use once the Johnson School students are no longer there.
But we don't know that yet.
We don't.
Okay.
Except that it was said at the last meeting that that was one of the last things Anna said, was that it would be considered a change of use. I asked, are you sure the buildings inspector makes that call? She said, yes, he's already said that. I said, so that's already been said to our community, that in 2 years, the Johnson building cannot be used by the YMCA. So if we need to walk that back, and that is uncertain, we need to say that that's uncertain now.
Okay.
All I know is I know that there's been a conversation with the building inspector that it would have to be a change of use, and they would have to receive that change of use license to be able to get in there, right? I don't know there's ever been a request made for there to be a change of use, so I don't know the variables that would occur if we came in 2 years and said now or the YMCA said we want to do a change of use of this building and have the Y. What that is then. I assume, based on what we've been told, that will be a no. That would be my assumption.
So here's my other concern, if I may. We only looked at the YMCA for the administration, like Dr. Nolan shared that the YMCA was the only vendor that you looked at. So, it's been said, often, potentially, Parks and Recs one day would move to the Johnson facility if it would be allowed to, if it could be considered not a change of use. So I want to be careful with our MOU that we are good partners to our town. We are good stewards with our town partners, that if the Johnson building is desired, that we're not just like grandfathering the YMCA in.
So this is a licensure agreement, right? So it's a use of facilities. It's not a lease or a rental where they have any rights. So we actually have authority to modify this as we need to. So if the town partners come to the school committee and there's an agreement on what to do with the building, then we could modify that, right? So there's nothing that really holds you to any legal ramifications, right, in 2 years to say we're not going to use this anymore.
I see that, but politically too, right? The YMCA is an important partner with our work, and so we don't want to invite the YMCA for 2 years because it's convenient now, and then in 2 years say, well, sorry, it's not so convenient. Like that's not anything we want to do, right? So I just want to for me, and this is the transparency here is essential, and the transparency did not happen with this process, and maybe it's going to start now, but it was not clear when it came about last week. So it's just as you write this MOU, I just hope that we are going to be true to our word, and we are going to create a situation where in 2 years nobody is surprised.
So I actually had a follow-up question because I didn't get a second question. So I wanted to follow up on a logistics piece that Catherine brought up, which was, if we know that Johnson families who have moved to other schools have been guaranteed ASAP spots. So if they decide that over the next 2 years, however old their child is, that they would like to be at Johnson for whatever reason, and then in 2 years, is their ASAP spot guaranteed for that specific Johnson family?
So there, to my knowledge, was never a discussion about having Johnson families who are at different buildings now be able to come back to ASAP for Johnson. There are currently 26 students who will attend Johnson School next year that have ASAP, that are enrolled for ASAP at Johnson next year.
Mm-hmm.
Those students will be able to remain at Johnson at ASAP, at the Johnson rate, or with their financial assistance. That's part of, I've already had that conversation as part of this process. And so it would be other students that don't have, I would assume that don't already have an enrollment in ASAP that would be able to come to the Johnson YMCA.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on my question. So say they've decided to go to Brown, and they are in, I don't know, they're in first grade or second grade. So for the next 2 years, they decide that their student they've been guaranteed ASAP at Brown. And then they decide that for 2 years, they're going to come back to Johnson because the Y is operating in Johnson and they would like to be in their neighborhood. Then I don't even know if this could happen. Then in the third year, they would like to have that ASAP spot back in the school that they went to. Can they have it back? Is this important?
Yeah, this is very.
Oh, okay.
This is that's the essential question that people are asking right now.
Yeah, so that's what I want, because they've been guaranteed that the Johnson families have special rights.
Can I just interject for a second? Honestly, mostly because it's 9 o'clock, I want to make sure that we're focused on the decision at hand, which is, as I understand it, the decision is, do we want to continue to allow the administration to negotiate a license agreement with YMCA or not? We can vote this down and not have the YMCA come to Johnson at all, or we can have the negotiation process go through and then negotiate and then approve the license agreement in the fall. Talking about logistics, I'm not saying it's not important. We can raise those questions, like in terms of like the enrollment, what happens if you enroll in YMCA? Does that take away? I just want to make sure we're focused on what is the decision, like what is the information, what are the answers we need to decide whether we want to pursue a license agreement with a YMCA or not.
Do we approve the license agreement?
Yes.
And do we even have a meeting before this? Because this is supposed to go into effect in September.
What I'm trying to do now is to get your approval on this, so you're allowing me to negotiate a different rate, essentially, for the facilities use process, right? Which that's what policy, I think it's KF, requires, right? That you can, if there's any modifications to the rates, that's what you're allowing me to do. And then I would bring the licensing agreement forward to you for the final rate. I just want to make sure that the Y is ready if they're going to finish their processes of getting their licenses and their pieces done and look at enrollment numbers and all those. I want to make sure that we're good there before we get any further to the process.
So there's two people from the public I want to get them to speak, and then hopefully we'll vote either way so we can move forward. Ms. McDonough, then you'll go next.
Well, one thing I'm worried about in this is that one of the reasons I voted to close Johnson was that it was not ADA compliant, and it's still not ADA compliant. So if you're going to run an ASAP program and you're going to bring students from yet different locations, only students who are well-abled are able to participate in that ASAP program. So that feels discriminatory, and closing Johnson was a really heartbreaking decision for me. I know people didn't believe it, but I went into heart failure with only 20% of my heart working and was in the hospital for a month. So I'd like to see integrity in this, and the building still is not ADA compliant. So please think long and hard about creating a situation where only able-bodied children can come to ASAP from different locations.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Brinley Vickers, Precinct 8. Am I allowed to actually ask a couple of questions and get responses, or am I only have to say something?
Yeah, you can ask them through me.
Oh, so the first question, which kind of follows some of my other questions, is this like carte blanche right now, where the administration just goes and writes the MOU and the school committee doesn't see it again before it goes into process? How does that actually, what is the actual process for this?
This week, as I've taken on this, the school committee will see this MOU after the input's put in, as well as the licensing agreement.
So does that mean the public would get a chance to have a clue of what's happening again before the decision is made?
I think that the public would be able to hear through the school committee process as I present some of the details that are in that MOU. Yes.
Okay. The next has to do with what's already been mentioned. Full disclosure, I'm a Johnson past family. I no longer have kids at Johnson, but went to the recent promotion ceremony and had a lot of families have conversations with me. And I would say that it's kind of mixed right now. I think that there are a lot of people who would actually like to see this. Their questions would be what's already been there, and so I would hope that we see that in the MOU. In other words, will the Johnson neighborhood families actually have a priority, or is it going to be a lottery? And then so when I say Johnson neighborhood families, I mean families that have already chosen to go to their other school or have had to go to the other school already because of how the Johnson closure is working. Will they have a priority, or will it be straight up lottery? And then if they do and are able to go there and keep their kids after school in their own neighborhood so that it's less traffic, it's less walking, it's easier for older siblings to get them, et cetera, what happens to their place in line when it does close? And then the very last thing is this have to be a 2-year thing, or is it a year at a time? Like, it feels like with everything that's happened right now in the Johnson community, it seems kind of crazy that we're negotiating something for 2 years when we should probably be negotiating something for 1 year with a 1-year extension. Thank you.
Yeah.
The anticipation, this would be a 1-year license. That's the way the licensing works right now with the YMCA and at East. So I don't anticipate it will be longer than that. I do just need to get kind of process in my head the idea that students who currently have ASAP enrollment at their other schools, like Brown, for example, let's say you're a Johnson student that moved to Brown, I would anticipate they would remain at Brown and not necessarily have a right to come back to the Johnson ASAP program. That would be removing one spot to move to another, and then hopefully that, somebody else might have to then from a different school that doesn't have a spot shift over to Brown if that's possible. Right now, Brown, for example, will have Brown students at ASAP. All the other schools fortunately have ASAP for their schools. The 26 students that are at Johnson now, that are enrolled in Johnson for the next school year, would have an absolute right to be in the Johnson ASAP program. Those are the kids that would have that absolute right at the ASAP rate that we have for the district. It would be other students outside of that realm in the Natick Public Schools that don't actually have after-school childcare that would probably be prioritized to get into that program, because that's our goal here, right, is to make sure that after-school care happens. So if you lose a spot at one school and then come back, it makes a process that's a little more difficult, I think, to try to figure out and adapt to. But I think the only guarantee that I could make right now is that those 26 students that are already enrolled at ASAP for next year at Johnson would have a right to stay at that Johnson program at that rate.
Sorry, I thought I was done, but if I could, one quick follow-up. Just because transportation is a cost that we talk about a lot. It has to do with school start time changing and after-school care and Medco, and it just comes up a lot. It seems to me that it might be a good idea to actually have a bigger picture in mind, because families might want to stay in their neighborhoods. So if there are two Johnson kids who have been moved to Brown but want to be in Johnson aftercare, and there are two Brown families that want ASAP, it seems to me like it would make more sense to look at the whole picture for transportation-wise as opposed to not. And so I would hope that as you move forward that you actually consider the efficiency of our busing when we're looking at families and moving kids around from school to school. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my understanding, negotiate the licensure, the MOU. It will come back to public vote in a meeting that's not scheduled yet, but would have to be presumably soon.
So we're starting, it'll be end of August, September. I'm hoping that today's commitment to this, entering the licensing negotiation, is a commitment to the YMCA being at Johnson. But I will, probably not next week, but the week after, have something that I can give to Shai to give to the committee for next steps.
And does that need to be approved by the committee, or is it just shared for, comment or?
I mean, technically, the only thing that has to be approved by the committee is the change of the fee based on policy KF. But I'm totally up to having you guys look at it and take a vote on it and agree.
Because the MOU is only one piece of it. I think the things that are raised. I mean, is there a cost? Is there additional cost if we're having to bus kids from multiple elementary schools to Johnson? And is YMCA taking on that cost? What buses are those? There was vague talk about, a circular bus that went to multiple programs, but that was never really, that was a great goal, but we didn't actually put a dollar sign to it. So I think I'm looking at three things here. We're looking at the license for the fees, which will have understanding in terms of what they can use, et cetera. The second piece is the selection process and any kind of downstream impacts of that selection process, which I don't assume would be in the MOU. And then the third would be transportation and any cost associated with that. Those are like three big ticket items with lots of implications as we stare down the barrel of summer vacation, that it's not clear to me that the school committee, would have purview over budget.
I think the transportation piece is a separate piece to this. I know Dr. Nolan had shared this thought that's working through of the transportation arrangements going around from all the businesses and all the different childcares, so we can share that, right? This will help this will help the YMCA being there, but I don't think it negates the YMCA from being able to be there, right? Because it's still after-school childcare, and that's the primary piece here. Obviously, the Y will have their own ways to enroll students, with the understanding that our Johnson students will be in the MOU with a different costs and a different rate.
And will the MOU cover that they're responsible for the transportation from any and all elementary schools?
I don't think that we can force that in an MOU with them.
There's just a lot of questions in terms of the implementation of this that have really broad effects in terms of, practicalities of logistics, potential costs. I mean, we did talk about the bus that would go to different programs, but I don't think we took a vote to fund it in any way. And it was mentioned side by side with, potential funding from the state, which was one could be used for Metco or could be used for after-school care. And I think we kind of voted that it was going to be used for Metco. So I mean.
So those transportation pieces that were being referred to isn't mutually exclusive to the Johnson ASAP program, right? That is a community-wide kind of effort to get together and help families in transportation in general, not just related to Johnson nor not just related to the YMCA program. That has to be a continued conversation, but.
Ms. Brunel?
So am I hearing that if we approve this tonight, we're also approving that Natick Public Schools will be responsible for getting students from other schools to Johnson?
I want you to consider this like any other private after-school program, right, where we're not responsible to bring a child from Memorial to, say, Tobin, right? Tobin has figured some things out to help out with that, right, and that's fantastic. It helps parents. That is not what the only ones that we would be responsible for is getting the students that are currently at Johnson to that Johnson program because they're already there. Would not be our responsibility in that case. This is just using our facilities to have their private program within for the students that are not those 26 Johnson students, so to speak.
How do kids get to East?
I think the Y might actually have a bus that does that, but that's not part of the MOU.
Can I just interject for a second? Because I feel like we're going to this a lot of slippery slopes. What I would recommend is we decide now whether we as a Natick Public Schools want to, in essence, rent one of our spaces, the Johnson School, to YMCA. I think there's a lot of other conversations. July 1st, we'll have a new interim superintendent. A lot of these conversations are conversations that I think she can lead with the administration team. One of the things I'd like to do in the retreat, which I don't think we can have now anymore, but that's fine. I mean, tonight. I don't mean ever. I mean, tonight. Is to raise all these questions, right? To raise these are all big questions. How do we address childcare? How do we address transportation for childcare? How do we address issues around Johnson transitions? These are all big questions that I think we need to put on Ms. Wong's agenda. So I think, and these are all good conversations. I'm not saying they're not. I just want to make sure that we kind of organize ourselves in terms of the decision, this specific decision, and then raise all the questions we want to figure out.
There's insufficient information in a lot of these cases in order to answer that question. All things being great, absolutely, let's get as much childcare as we possibly can. But to make a decision, it feels very short-sighted. We've said it's short-sighted. We're making, we're saying, are we willing to say right now, yes, we want to bring the Y in there without understanding what the impacts are to the educators there, without solutions to the transportation problems, without an idea about what will happen 2 years from now when those spots go away? Like, these are answering those questions first. I mean, this is answering those questions first. That's what didn't happen with the Johnson vote. The vote was to close Johnson, and now we've just seen this ripple effects of terrible execution. So
Ms. Flathers, we have a motion on the floor. Do you want to make an alternative motion? Because we have to, at some point, move on. I mean, we can talk about this, but if we want to go in a different direction, we can, as a committee, go in a different direction. We just need a motion.
Well, we actually need a motion. The motion is on the agenda if someone wants to make it.
I just want us to move in one direction or another, as opposed to just given the time.
If I may speak, I think, Shai, you see that you want us to vote because you think the questions have been answered. And right now, I feel like I have to vote no because I do not understand what the implications of this MOU are.
So just to correct you, I'm not saying we should vote on this because all the questions have been answered. I think we should vote on a direction, whether it's to approve, whether it's to postpone. Any motion on the earth is available to us. And if we say we don't have enough information, we want to postpone, that's a decision the committee can make. But that would require a motion, and then we all vote on that. Yeah, Mr. Brand.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah.
I would move to enter a licensing agreement with the YMCA for the use of surplus space at the Johnson Elementary School.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the motion? Ms. McDonough?
I would like to amend the motion to include the phrase, and that the licensing agreement and the MOU that results come back to the school committee for approval.
If I may.
You may.
Could you maybe add, and such approval won't be unreasonably withheld?
I would add that.
Friendly amendment?
Works for me.
Well, yeah, okay, and that the licensing agreement.
Ms. Collins?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have an amended motion. I am happy to take on any other motions too, if there's other directions we want to go tonight.
Do you mind just reading the new
Yeah, so
total?
now it says, move to enter a licensing agreement with the YMCA for the use of surplus space at the Johnson Elementary School, and that the licensing agreement and resulting MOU will come back before the committee for approval.
Such approval.
Right, I guess it's another sentence. Such approval
I don't know, you're the English major.
will not be unreasonably withheld.
Can I
Want me to
suggest
read
an
it again?
additional amendment, or just language-wise? Because Tim, I trust that you'll figure out from the business perspective and the teacher's perspective, but I do think trade-offs will need to be made in terms of things like transportation and logistics that I don't think are part of the MOU. And so I think, and certainly the longer-term plan is not part of the MOU. So that's where, what can be brought, do you think there will be any time once you begin, I don't know if this is the highest priority, and I don't want to assume that this is a high priority. I'm very concerned that we move forward, it looks okay for next year, and we lose sight of what happens 2 years from now. So, is there anything, are we just guessing? To bring back, I guess it's this implementation plan. There's things outside the MOU that affect the implementation plan. So would you feel like the administration can report back on some of these other questions that we have?
So just to clarify, so you started by saying you want to make an amendment. Is there an amendment? I don't want to be difficult. I just want to make sure we have.
The MOU is only one piece of the questions that we've been asking. Like the MOU and any, resulting, I don't know, what'd you say about it, implications or logistics?
Well, the MOU that results from the licensing agreement, would this be part of the retreat where we would talk about a longer-term plan for Johnson?
The MOU is just the agreement with the Y.
Yeah.
And so I do think,
But then there would be a larger goal of developing a plan after the 2 years so maybe it's a piece that we look into, rather than it being a part of this particular motion. But it would have to be said in the retreat that this has to be a priority. I
think that's fine. I think I would love this to happen. I think just expect when it comes back for approval, I wouldn't want to unreasonably withhold, a yes. But I do think some of those questions will come up. How are they busing? Are they going to bring 5 buses through that? Where, some of those questions will come up again. And so just be thoughtful about it.
And if I may, my recommendation is that we document all those questions. I'd love the questions. I think that if you can email them, all of us collectively, because I think that would be helpful to the administration to have all the questions that we want answers to. Again, I see this as a 2-step process anyway. I think that there are, Ms. Morell, to your point, I do think that there's information missing that I just think we need to ask the questions and give the administration time to answer and hopefully be able to make a good decision.
And it's on a fast clock. And I wish we'd thought of this as something to be done back in January. But here we are.
Okay. With that, any other changes to the motion before we vote on the motion? Any other questions or comments on the motion? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor? Any abstentions? Anyone against? The motion passes. Not to sound like I'm in a rush, but that was our last item. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Oh, don't we have did we do the consent agenda? Oh, we did the consent agenda. I think I moved it. Sorry.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Sorry, that's me.
Never
All
mind.
those in favor? Abstentions? Any votes against? We're adjourned.